I want to thank you all for coming again to our public meeting to talk about the downtown transportation plan. And I think those of you who were here before, I'm glad you came back because I think we have some new things that we'd like to share with you. One of the best things about putting together a project like this and actually bringing together public involvement is that you get to see just exactly how this whole process shakes out and the benefits of actually making your voices heard. And we've heard a lot of positive comments about this particular plan, but we've had a lot of questions. We'll talk more about that later today. And then we've also had a lot of criticism, and good constructive criticism. And I think what you'll find today is that we've taken that into consideration. And I think the concept that we have right now as we move forward with the ODOT application for transportation alternative funds, I think you'll see that we have something that might hit a little closer to the sweet spot in terms of us having something that everyone can appreciate. So with that, we'll go ahead and get started. I don't know if you want to click forward, or maybe I can click forward here. Just as a quick review, you know, this plan is not something that was dreamt up by any one individual in our community. It actually is a product of a collaborative effort between a lot of different groups in the city of Findlay and Hancock County, including our engineering department, of course, Hancock County Economic Development from the Alliance, Hancock County Regional Planning, city leaders, great insight and feedback from ODOT. One of the best things that I think is nice to tell people about this particular plan is that ODOT is actually financially invested in this plan already prior to it even being funded. And so when you look at what we've put together in terms of our investment to try and encourage this and do the research and the data that's necessary to support the activities moving forward, we also know that ODOT's contributing $40,000 to this project as well. So I think that speaks to the collaborative effort that we're trying to put forth for you today. Downtown business owners and our downtown property owners, they have been great. They've told us what they need. They've told us what they want to see. They've told us what their customers want to see. And I think we've taken that into consideration as well. And then a citizen advisory committee, which is basically the economic restructuring committee out of our Findlay downtown group that was formed just a couple years ago to help us make downtown Findlay the place to be. And so with that, I think we'll go ahead and get this thing started because you get to hear me talk all the time. So we'll go ahead and have Craig Gossman come on up and he can start the presentation. Craig. Don't touch the mic.
I see the big note there, yeah. All right. Craig Gossman with the Gossman Group. I'm one of the members of our consulting team that's been looking into the work here in Findlay. I'm no newcomer to Findlay. I've been coming to your great community for the last 10, 12 years and working on a variety of initiatives here in town. So it's, as my wife says, it's actually becoming my first home. So you're going to hear from a few people here at the podium. And what I thought I would do is maybe kick things off with really trying to put in perspective what this project that we're working on now, how it relates to a broader set of goals in a bigger initiative. Because at the end of the day, what we're trying to do is create a healthier, more vibrant downtown. Now, one could argue that it's vibrant enough, it's healthy enough, and why are we changing it? But I think anybody that's involved in any kind of community venture, or for your church group, or for your school, or whoever you're representing in community, that you're always trying to advance it. You're always trying to make it better. No better time to talk about that than during the NCAA basketball tournament now, where some teams wish that they were a little better than they ended up. But the fact of the matter is we're trying to help Findlay explore the future, make some informed decisions about what we might want to do with downtown to make it a better place as in the years to come. So just a couple of points about this. I won't go into detail about it. You can read, you can see the big words up there. But really, what I'm trying to get across with this slide and the following one is just some of the elements or the ingredients that we see. We do this work a lot in downtowns throughout the country. And some of the things that just always bubble to the top about what downtowns really want to be so that they can be more successful are on this list. And a vibrant retail, entertainment, cultural kind of destination is something that's pretty important. It's really, I guess at the end of the day, for those of us that are 60 years plus, we probably remember going into this downtown or downtowns that you might have been from before you lived in Findlay, and you know that was the hub of activity because the suburbs didn't really exist then. You either were in downtown or you were in modestly sized neighborhoods, but no real strong neighborhood retail going on out there. So when you wanted to have your goods and services, you came downtown to usually a locally owned department store and locally owned shops and so forth. So fast forward to today, where we've got the suburban shopping malls, we have suburban strip centers, we have people shopping online, even leaving the community to do their shopping. We think that trying to retain that in downtown is extremely critical and vital. And fortunately, you have a pretty vibrant downtown in Findlay right now, so we're really identifying this as a positive and plus, but we can always make something better. Downtown is a destination, not just something to drive through. This is pretty critical because it's not just about retail and entertainment, it's about creating kind of a special place. And downtown represents that special place, not just to the people that make their living from it in the retail shops or the people that happen to live there, but from anybody that's in the community that downtown serves. Universities that aren't downtown, but guess what? Downtown's very important to their success. The hospitals that are usually not in downtown, but the downtown is very important to their success as well. So making sure that it's a destination. Strong neighborhoods, not just the neighborhood of downtown, because downtown is a neighborhood as well, but the adjacent neighborhoods, the neighborhoods that we can walk into the downtown from or get to quickly through primarily through the car today. Again, flashing back to those old days, I'm not sure if Findlay had one, but the community that I grew up in is not much larger than Findlay back in the day, in Zanesville over on the east side of the state. And we had the streetcar, we had the bus system, and it made life pretty comfortable to move about the city without necessarily having to get in the car to do that. Higher education close by, we think that's a pretty special ingredient, and you have that here with the University of Findlay. How can we link those two together or maybe get some of the benefits from both so that downtown really does have a success story to tell that's linked to that university mission? And then quality gathering spaces. This is something that we think is extremely critical, and perhaps on trips that you've made to other downtowns, you've taken notice of the great courthouse square or the large park in downtown, that space where things can happen outside. Findlay doesn't really have that kind of space. It doesn't have the town square, it doesn't have the courthouse square. So we think that there's maybe ways to start thinking about that a little differently here. Every downtown has a story to tell. And those that have been fortunate enough to kind of retain their historic fabric over the years, it's extremely critical in our mind that historic preservation plays a critical role in the future of that downtown. Because that's really some of the parts of the community that distinguish itself from other places. So we think preservation is a very critical part to that. And engage public-private partnership. This isn't just about the private sector, and it's not just about the public sector. It's trying to find ways for both of those groups to bring initiatives to the table that we can, at the end of the day, really gather momentum from and make downtown a better place. And then we hear the term pedestrian friendly a lot, and we just are trying to emphasize there that because downtown is a walkable, livable community and neighborhood as well, that the safety of all that really makes a lot of sense to have in our downtowns. You may not be aware of the program that already exists here in Findlay. That's an organization that's really focused on trying to help the downtown through the management of the Main Street program. And this program comes through the Heritage Ohio organization, which is a statewide initiative. I happen to serve as a Board of Trustees member on the Heritage Ohio board. But Findlay has been identified now as an emerging community to really take on that promise of how to really help manage downtown, just not let things happen randomly, to actually have someone looking after that. So the city has taken on that program, the Chamber of Commerce has taken on that program, and Tim's going to give you a little background here on the 4 points to kind of talk about what that program is all about as it relates to the downtown.
Well, good evening. I'm Tim Miley. I'm the Assistant Director of Economic Development over in the Alliance. And as Craig was mentioning, the Main Street program, those 6 points were the statewide organization, their goals, and then how we run the Main Street program. Maria Riza, who is here somewhere, is the Main Street coordinator for our office. And there's really a 4-point plan that we take a look at. And the operations is headquartered out of the Chamber of Commerce, the marketing through the Convention and Visitors Bureau, design through the Hancock Regional Planning Commission, and economic restructuring is headed out of our office, economic development. And what we've done is we've combined the design and economic restructuring. They were so related in really what the scope of what they do. we've combined those committees to make the Economic Restructuring Committee, and that's a committee that the mayor referred to, the Citizen Advisory Committee, as it was listed there. So I just kind of want to walk through of how we've gotten to this point a little bit through the Main Street program, and we'll talk a little bit about the Transportation Alternative Program. So the Advisory Committee, Economic Structuring Committee, you've heard it listed through a lot of different ways, was charged with what do we need to do to address downtown to make it a better place? And there's lots of ways to do that. Well, what we started was saying, what should a Main Street be? And how we came up with that is our Findlay tagline is what Main Street should be, exclamation point. Well, we flipped that and said, what should Main Street be? And we came up with a lot of different buzzwords, which you see up here, safe, growing, local government support, parking, investment, entertainment, recreation, just a lot of different items. A lot of people threw out there on the board. That's kind of why they're all out there. This was just a brainstorming session, just to get people thinking. And what we really came up with were 3 core areas that we think are extremely important, kind of concepts, core values that we should not compromise as a community and as a committee, which is safety, and you see them repeated on every slide, safety, walkable, livable, and parking. And as you see, as we walk through all the options that we have and all the concepts, we always have those core values in place and in mind, and trying to address possibly all 3 at once or one or the other. And when Mr. Hemminger announced the marathon project at Rotary, he made the comment that Findlay should have the template for a downtown community. And we're very lucky to be in Findlay with everything that we have, and we really think that we should have the template for a downtown community and putting the pieces together. So as we sat down, we thought, what should a Main Street be? We had our core values, and we said, what are the goals of our Economic Restructuring Committee? Where do we want to take this committee? How does it fit into the Heritage Ohio program? So here's some goals that we had. Viable downtown, safety comes up again, efficient traffic flow, increased parking. So you're seeing a lot of these similar themes come one after another. Wayfinding, let people know how to get to stores, restaurants, the university, the hospital, whatever it may be. How do you get from I-75 to downtown? Well, also, we wanted to minimize any impact on emergency response forces. And then the last one there, talking about through traffic, the debate of should Main Street be used for point A to point B, or should Main Street be used for people who are going there as a destination? So I think a lot of you have probably seen these next few slides, but we're going with the theme right time, right place for a lot of different reasons. And this topic of Main Street has come up in this community for many different years. And right now we're seeing a lot of opportunities to leverage projects. You hear about catalytic projects and whatever it may be. Well, I like to start off with this first slide because this shows our local entrepreneurs, our local residents reinvesting in downtown. You got the picture of the Gathering building. Michael Gardner's done some wonderful things there. The RCM building where Jerry Murray went in and redid that. The Logan's building, but we could go on and on and on with what people are doing. We're starting to see an increase in downtown living, but it's very important that we recognize the people who are currently investing downtown and what they're doing and the vision that they have. So that's one reason for right time, right place. Another very important piece is the Marathon Performing Arts Center for the Performing Arts. This is going to be a great tool to continue what Craig was talking about, to have our downtown as a destination. This should be built within a couple of years. Excited to have the groundbreaking later this spring and coming in. It's going to be a great piece. It was Heritage Ohio is also about historic preservation. It's a very important part. This is a good example of maintaining our last auditorium downtown of historic preservation. And then finally, the announcement of the Marathon campus and what they're trying to do, and the importance. It's going to be a beautiful campus setting. I think everybody's seen the pictures of what they're looking at. And so we've got these pieces on Main Street. We've got local entrepreneurs doing things. We've got the Arts Center, Marathon. We want to continue to set the atmosphere and environment for continued investments, because if you take a look where the Argyle building was, the buildings by Rosilli's, the buildings north of the river, we'd like to see all those redeveloped and have some opportunities to do that. That's my job as economic development. So carrying forward on the right time, right place is we've had this idea for a long time and it's been tried, and now we've got some catalytic projects. And I know there's been a lot of questions of how do you pay for this? Well, I throw this transportation alternative program in the bucket of right time, right place. This is a program through the Ohio Department of Transportation, a competitive grant process, and we'll walk through that here in a minute. But this came to our attention actually through our Economic Restructuring Committee. We were talking about downtown safety, and we're talking about semi-trucks. And we called ODOT and said, you know, is there a way to minimize we got so many pedestrians walking downtown with the semi-trucks. And they said, short of removing state routes from downtown, that's not gonna happen. But they said we do have some programs that can help calm traffic, that can maybe create an environment where the semi-trucks may, if they're through trucks, may go to another area. You know, we point to County Road 99. That is a perfect area for trucks that are coming down 75 and want to head east of town. That goes back to our wayfinding. Maybe we need to make it a clearer pathway for those trucks to travel through town, or if you're on the east side of town, pointing out how you get to the west side of town. So we started taking a look at this program, and this is straight from the Ohio Department of Transportation website. And you take a look at what do they fund? Bicycle, pedestrian, community improvement activities, environmental mitigation, safe routes for non-drivers, recreational trails. These are non-traditional Ohio Department of Transportation programs. A few years ago, ODOT was strictly focused on highways and moving trucks through. What is the capacity? Well, they have now recognized multimodal transportation under the Ohio Department of Transportation. This is what this program is going after, hence the name Transportation Alternatives Program. So we thought this could be a good fit. We started to take a look at the eligibility criteria. You obviously would have to be doing this in the public realm. You know, a city or a county would be an applicant, and we wanted to take a look at the process. So how did we get to this point with the Transportation Alternative Program? Back in the fall of 13, we engaged LSL Planning with Brad Strader, who you'll hear from next, and started to take a study to say, would there be an opportunity for the Transportation Alternatives Program within the city of Findlay? So they started data collection, and Brad's going to talk about this as data-driven. At the last meeting, you heard data-driven. It was very important that we understood where we were as a community as far as where cars were going, were they turning left, right, straight through, that entire piece, and that can't be stressed enough. So we did some initial data research, and we thought we were prepared for a letter of interest, which had to be in by February 3rd. And we'll talk about it on the next slide, but the letter of interest basically defines the scope for the Transportation Alternative Program. The Ohio Department of Transportation District 1 reviewed our letter of interest and approved that. That was the first hurdle in the Transportation Alternative Program, or first step, I should say. So then after we determined we were accepted for the letter of interest, we needed to continue additional study to make sure that we were going down the right path. And that's where the mayor mentioned that the Ohio Department of Transportation, funded $40,000 to apply for their grant, which shows their interest in the program. We also were able to receive $40,000 from Findlay City Council as part of the capital plan. So now we've got, the alliance is in, the Ohio Department of Transportation, and the city of Findlay. So we continue to study the detailed study, and Brad's going to show the study area of the impact. So to get in details of what was in that letter of interest there's certain items that the Ohio Department of Transportation can fund. On the bottom of the list and these are in no particular order, they were just all bullet pointed in the application, reverse angle parking, which I know we've had a lot of talk about reverse angle parking. That is struck through because that is not an eligible project within the Transportation Alternative Program. The other items that are eligible were bump outs to improve pedestrian safety, and you'll see bump outs at intersections here from pictures here in a minute. Relocation of trees. We think if we move the trees from their current location on the sidewalk to within the mid-block crosswalkings and the bump outs, we can increase the capacity of our sidewalks, improve the aesthetics, get the right proper type of trees so the trees aren't blocking all the store owners. The Corey Street cycle track, bicycle track, it's an extremely important piece of the Ohio Department of Transportation Alternative Program, and then other bike improvements. And then so parking was struck through, but if you take a look at the alleys, for example, I'm a big proponent of improving our alleys. I think they need to be resurfaced. I think they could be lit. And once you do that, it creates a second back door for the restaurants and buildings downtown. People can park one block off, and that can functionally increase your parking capacity. So there's a lot of different ideas of the LOI, and we're limited to what we can go forward with the Transportation Alternative Program based on what we submitted in the LOI. So I'm going to hand it over to Brad, and Brad's going to talk a little bit about the data and some concepts that we have. And then just as a reminder, we're going to take a short break when Brad is finished, and then we will do Q&A.
Thanks, Tim. Good evening again. Brad Stewart. How many of you were here for one of the previous discussions? And how many were not? Okay, quite a few. So we are covering some old territory and some new territory here. So this is the study area, and I apologize for our maps that are in the back. And those of you, I think you caught on, I tried to catch most of you, but we have the same board up in 3 places. So if we had a big crowd around it, some of you said, well, what's different between this board and that board? They're the same board, just so people could each see the board. But those dashed red lines, that is the study area. So some people said, well, what are you doing on Liberty? Because we had a dashed line, nothing on Liberty. That's just to show the main study area, the downtown study area. So this is the area we looked at, and as Tim said, data-driven. So back before we really started back in December, we started taking traffic counts, in particular parking counts, because December is the peak parking period of the year for the downtown generally. And we looked at traffic counts, 24-hour counts, and turning movement counts at 16 intersections in and around the downtown. And from that, we came up with an analysis of the existing conditions. And we used that to say, well, when we have changes in the downtown and with Marathon and the Performing Arts Center, how's traffic and transportation going to work in the future? So we wanted to look at the current data and trends, but also look at the future. And so we looked at the rush hour, peak hour, morning and evening, so the turning movement counts we're taking at the peak time of the day. So we looked at the 24-hour counts and said, what are the peak times of the day? I think it was 4:45 to 5:45 in the evening was the peak. So we did turning movement counts in like 2-hour blocks in the morning and evening and figured out what's the peak 1 hour. Although at some intersections like Sandusky and East, we said, well, there's really a 15-minute peak that we have to look at. The rest of the hour isn't quite as severe. The average daily count on Main Street is about 16,000 vehicles a day. So when you're designing a road, so I've worked on, I don't know, 30, 50 downtown projects and transportation projects. Dan Biebert's our traffic engineer, and the rest of the team have worked on a lot of downtowns. And typically if you have 18,000 vehicles a day or less, you design a 3-lane road. And you have to really look at how it works at the intersections and so forth, but that's pretty much the design. And so we have 5 lanes, which usually have a capacity of around 30 to 45, some communities even 50,000 or more vehicles a day. So we've got more capacity than we have volume, which is why we have people going at a higher speed and some of the reasons that we have some crash issues. So that was one thing we considered in looking at the volumes today. We looked also at the volumes in the future, and the predicted volumes in the future are like 22,000 or so, with all the changes going on and improvements downtown. And that really starts to strain a 3-lane road. So we're kind of on the bubble. So when we looked at reducing the number of lanes, we had to look at ways to divert some of the traffic to other routes. But that was kind of our philosophy in looking at the traffic count and the data. So we looked at the counts here, we looked at best practices from around the country, and what are the options. The other thing we looked at were crashes. And so we looked at 4-year crash history of the types of crashes in the downtown, the location of the crashes and the type. And we found a couple things that we mentioned the last time we presented is the pedestrian and bike, but especially pedestrian crashes were higher here than you would expect. And like the highest in this part of Ohio, District 1. And also the crashes related to parking was high. And I think that's partly due to the speed that people are driving, partly due to people just aren't comfortable parallel parking and so forth. So there are some trends we looked at when we said, all right, here's the traffic volumes, here's the crashes, what are some ideas we can have to slow vehicles down a little bit, reduce crashes, make it better for pedestrians. So a couple of you talked to me and said, well, you know, why all the concern about the downtown and pedestrians? Well, the trend now is to make walkable, vibrant downtowns to keep communities vibrant. Battle Creek just lost part of Kellogg's. It moved to Grand Rapids, and the reason they said is because Grand Rapids is a vibrant, walkable downtown. Battle Creek isn't. So Kellogg's just last week announced they're moving some of their activities to Grand Rapids. I work with Dow Chemical in Midland, Michigan, and they said, we need to do something to make downtown more vibrant or we can't be competitive to get people from around the world to come and live in Michigan or Midland, even though it's a beautiful city. So you look at safety, you look at volumes, and you also look at how do we make the downtown vibrant and recognize the downtown, it's not reminiscing, the downtown that we're looking at is not the downtown of the past, but the downtown of today and the future, keeping young people in the city. So some of the existing conditions we looked at, when we looked at that data, as I mentioned, high crash rates, we looked at the volumes. We have certain intersections, not just Main Street, but certain intersections that have congestion. Like East and Sandusky, especially in that 15, 20-minute period in the evening when Marathon and other businesses are letting out. Blanchard and Sandusky has pretty long backups of left turn lanes because it's very limited there. The Western and Sandusky, where you have the four-way stop, partly because of the railroad crossing, very congested during school hours, but much of the day, not even just peak hours, but much of the day, have very long backups, 11, 15, 17 cars backed up, so that intersection doesn't work very well. Main Cross and Western also doesn't operate as well as it might, but it's not as bad as maybe the other three. So we have, and Main Cross and Main Street had also some poor, longer delays than you would like to see as a traffic engineer. So we looked at those intersections and said, how can we improve things for pedestrians, but how do we also address some of the congestion problems now that will only get worse in the future? So we came up with some alternatives for Main Street. One alternative was to keep the 2 lanes in each direction and have median. For longer stretches of a median that's upper left, but you'd still have left turn lanes. Then we looked at reverse angle parking maybe on one side of the street and have 2 lanes in one direction. And a number of you said at the last workshop, well, I could see reverse angle on one side, but not on both. So we did look at that option. Another option was reverse angle parking on both sides of the street and going from 5 lanes down to 3. And to do that, we would have to divert some of the traffic to some of the other roadways. And now we have sort of a variation, a new alternative that I'll talk about in a minute that kind of takes the best pieces of each of those. Or we looked at alternative number 4 there in the bottom right, was to combine all those and have reverse angle parking with medians and other things. And that's what we presented to get some reaction at the last meeting. So what did we hear? We heard a lot of comments. We heard positive and negative comments and a lot of good questioning comments. I mean, there were some comments about, why do we need to worry about pedestrians in downtown and so forth? Well, these kind of changes aren't going to benefit people that don't care about the downtown. But for most of you, I think, that do care about the downtown, we're going to look at what is the way to make the downtown safer for pedestrians, work well for cars and safer for cars, but also make sure we have a vibrant downtown into the future. And some of the things we heard are mixed opinions on reverse angle parking. Some people liked the idea. Some felt, even though it's a similar maneuver to parallel parking, it would be too confusing. Just weren't used to it, and if we're going to do it, it's too dramatic to do it on Main Street. Try it off on a side street first and see how it would work. And we looked at that, but we just don't have enough width on some of the side streets. We heard we're making a lot of changes and we're not really adding that much parking, even though it was kind of cost effective to use the pavement. Are there other ways we can provide the parking without constraining Main Street? And so we heard a lot of that comment. We heard about traffic flow, that if we put this median in on Main Street and we narrow the number of lanes down, that we're going to reduce emergency response times, make it difficult for police and fire to get around a crash or respond to an emergency. And even though there are other routes and your responders find many ways to get around, they kind of avoid Main Street in the peak times anyway, I think that was a valid concern. We heard some comments that there's already congestion. If you narrow the lanes and people don't take these other routes, we're going to have more congestion. Part of that is I think we didn't explain very well those improvements that we're talking about off of Main Street. But there was some feeling that the alternative routes weren't going to be attractive enough to people because it would still be quicker to go on Main Street. And particularly we heard from people that are involved in trucking businesses that they're important to Findlay too. And if we constrain Main Street, even if we improve the alternate routes, it's going to make them very difficult to stay in business where they are. And then we heard a variety of other sources. Where's the funding going to come from to pay for this, to maintain this? What about snow removal, which is this time of year is a legitimate concern, and particularly after this winter. People say, well, I like the Corey Bikeway, I'll show in a minute, but we need more east-west connections for bike routes. Why don't you look at Lincoln or another street to have bike lanes? And then we had a lot of questions about when would this occur? How's the construction going to be handled? How do you minimize disruption on businesses? And a whole host of other things. These are just some of the main things that we heard. So taking all those comments, we've gone back and worked with our committee to revise the alternative that's being proposed tonight to get comments so that we can move forward. And this is just an illustration of what that would be. So the big changes are we're back to 2 lanes in each direction. So no more 1 lane in each direction. We're keeping the parallel parking and no reverse angle parking. We're still having the mid-block pedestrian crossing. So you can see in the top of this illustration here, there might be a narrow median that could be raised. It could be flush. It could be landscaped. It could have planters some of the year and be hardscaped the rest of the year so you can put snow on there. A lot of different ways could be designed, but they would be short primarily to slow vehicles down a little bit and make it easier for pedestrians to cross. And then those little curb bump outs where we don't have parking to shorten that pedestrian crossing distance so the pedestrians crossing disrupt traffic a little bit less, and it also helps protect the on-street parking. So we would have those at some of the mid-blocks And one of the reasons to do that, a couple of you were talking to me and say, why don't people cross at the corner? Well, people are crossing already at some of the mid-blocks, and downtown has changed. So if you want to have things like cafes downtown and outdoor dining, they tend to be more in the middle of the block than on the corners because there's more room. And so naturally people want to cross to and from those. And if you had the mid-block crossings, you're more likely to get them to concentrate and cross where they should instead of right now crossing kind of willy-nilly all across the street. So we'd be having crosswalks at intersections and crosswalks in the middle of the block. And there may be signs there that would say yield to pedestrians in the crosswalk or other ways to help alert drivers that they've got to pay attention to the pedestrians there. And these are just some illustrations that would go into the TAP application. On the upper left is one way where the median or the pedestrian line might be flush with the ground or just slightly raised. So you could still do snow storage. Emergency vehicles could use it if needed. Or if a vehicle's parking, you need to get around, you could use it. But that would be one option. Another option is the shot in the upper right is just putting planters in. Wouldn't be that type of planter necessarily, but some type of planter that in the summer months you could put planters on the median, not where the pedestrians cross, but where the pedestrians aren't crossing. Helps slow traffic down, adds a little bit of green. Some of you said we need to get more green downtown, but in the winter you would remove them, so that would be a place you could put snow in the wintertime. We'd still have these bump outs as shown in the lower left that would be at mid-block and at the intersections. And then the Corey Bikeway would be to take the current one of the lanes on Corey Street, make Corey one way the whole way. Right now, part of it's one way. Very low volume, low speed street. We didn't feel, some of you again said, can't you put bike lanes on Main Street? We just didn't feel that that's a good place. There's too many parking maneuvers. We don't have enough width, and we thought it's better to have a safe place for bikes. And Corey Street connects with the university, connects with the park, connects with the Riverwalk. I like the idea some of you brought up that maybe we look at bike lanes on Lincoln to connect Corey over to Sandusky in the future and have a loop. And that's something we could do if that's part of the package. We would have to remove the on-street parking on Lincoln, but I think that could be a good way to accommodate bikes, but not accommodating bikes on Main Street. So this is our overall plan. And these big red circles are not roundabouts, as somebody asked, but Western Sandusky, Main Cross in Sandusky, East in Sandusky, and Blanchard and Sandusky, those would be intersection improvements. So the proposal now is to add turn lanes and change signal timing to make it easier for traffic to get through those intersections. That would help reduce some of the demand on downtown. So even though we're still gonna have 2 lanes, it would give people another option. It would give emergency services another option, remove some of the bottlenecks to downtown. Some people talked about the cost. The pricey one is probably the Western intersection because it's a 4-way stop now, but because of the railroad crossing in close proximity, it would take a fairly expensive signal system to keep traffic from being on the railroad track and to eliminate the 4-way stop. And the idea there was to make Western, which is more the demand, a little bit more of a through, give Western more green time, Sandusky more red time, and it would process traffic much more efficiently than the 4-way stop does. And so those are the intersection improvements. And then we have the Corey Bikeway, as I mentioned, which might just start at Main Cross and go north, where it's a little bit wider, 26 feet wide. And potentially we had as an option it could extend down to Lincoln. And most people that had a comment liked extending it all the way to Lincoln. We had a couple of people that lived on Corey Street that were, I think, pretty open-minded, but wanted to understand how that would work. Would it be northbound or southbound? It would probably be northbound. Details to work out, and wouldn't necessarily be green, but it might be green when it crosses the street so people would know that that's a bikeway. And this is kind of a new way to get people concentrated on bicycling and trying to get some of those students in the University of Findlay safely to downtown. But not just for the students. Some of you tonight said, boy, if we had that, I would start biking to downtown. But if you're going to do that, make sure you provide some nice bike parking somewhere. So we might be looking at converting some of the on-street spaces to bike parking. This is an artist's illustration. This is actually a photo of Findlay, and we superimposed what these medians might look like, or these pedestrian crossings. So this is pretty much the width of the center turn lane. You would have these where you don't have left turns generally backing up, so they're away from the intersections. You still have your left turn bay. This is the pedestrian crossing. Probably doesn't show up really well, but the pedestrians would cross in a gap in the landscape. And again, it could be landscaping like that would be tolerant, seasonal landscaping very low, or it could be all hardscape or brick, or it could have planters on it. So there's pros and cons, and we'd be working as we go through the design with the best design in terms of maintenance and cost and what is responsive to the fire department. And you can see the on-street parking remains, 2 travel lanes in each direction, and by moving the trees to the bump outs and so forth, we clear up a little bit more space so we could have more outdoor dining. this is what would happen at the intersections. Again, these are the bump outs. So generally the curb stays where the curb is, except where we're extending it out at the mid-block crossings and at the intersections. That helps slow vehicles down at the intersection. It helps, we've had issues with cars going into the crosswalk when pedestrians are in the crosswalk, which is against the law. This helps focus motorists to see the pedestrians a little bit better, shortens the distance for pedestrians to cross, and we would change the pedestrian signals so that it's clear for the pedestrians when they have the right of way. They don't have to go searching around for a push button that sometimes is very hard to find. So I think it would work. Again, these have proven to be safer for pedestrians and for cars. So that's kind of the change in the design. The process would be the Transportation Alternatives Program, the application to ODOT. So the letter of interest that Tim mentioned just said they generally endorse the concept. Moving forward, they wanted to see public input, and we refined the design. So the refined design would go in. If the city submits, it would be due May 4th. So we're looking for input tonight on this change in design. If people like the old design better, if you like this one or you don't like any of them, the decision will be made how to proceed. Submit the application on May 4th. It's a competitive program. A lot of communities in Ohio are after this money. We've had, I think, very good response from ODOT, and they've been really partnering with the city and county to try to make sure we have a good application here. The funds, though, are statewide, not just in a district. The announcement of funding would be made in August for how much and what would be funded out of this. And then the design would be done next year, construction in 2016. Now, right now, ODOT plans to pave Main Street on 2017. If this project moves forward, the discussion right now from ODOT is they would move the repaving up to 2016. A couple people said, well, how can you minimize the impact on us as business people or residents? And we would try to sequence all this so it all happens once. You don't have, nothing irritates you more than one construction season, then the next year they do something else, and you think, why couldn't it be coordinated? ODOT's trying to work with the city and county to make sure this would all be coordinated for one construction season. So the next steps after tonight would be see the response we get, to do a more detailed engineering design, get that TAP application in, seek other funding, because those intersection improvements, those are not eligible for the TAP funding. And the county and city have been working for a number of other ODOT funds, Jobs and Commerce and others, to help fund those intersection improvements. But right now they would not be funded, even though I think there's a need there. City Council, through the process, would have to approve each step to proceed. So to go to the TAP application, to seek ODOT safety and other funds for those intersections. And the other part is, at the beginning of this meeting, as Craig mentioned, this transportation discussion is just part of the comprehensive plan for the downtown. It was accelerated or moved first because of the funding opportunity with ODOT. But those other things are very important, looking at housing, what's the market, what kind of businesses should we have downtown, parking. So if we haven't added parking with reverse angle, we need to come up with other places to gradually add parking to support residential and other businesses. So that'll be something to be looking at. Wayfinding, how do we get people to find the parking and know which parking is public versus private, or to find those alternate routes? And then finally, a strategy for implementation. Who's responsible? What's the sequence and timing for that? So that would be all yet to come. So with that, that's kind of an overview of where we are. We are going to have a Q&A discussion. I'm going to let you take about a 10-minute break here in a minute, but I just want to hit the protocol, and I'll do this again. So we want to be respectful of your time. And some of you came before 4 o'clock, so you've already been here a long time. So, and we've tried to talk to some of you, but once we get back in about 10 minutes, I'd ask you to come up and use the microphone there. Please give your name. If we could just have you keep to 1 or 2 questions, so everybody that wants to speak gets a chance to ask a question. After we get through anybody that has a question, then we can go back. If you have additional questions, we'll stay till the questions are done, or till I collapse. But we'll stay as long as we can. But I do ask you to be respectful of others here and try to get your questions to 1 to 2. If you have comments, you can still write comments down on a card and leave them at the table here. And we're going to just take a 10-minute break. Again, there are people with name tags, or either consultants or city staff or county staff. We'll be at the boards to answer some of your questions. So you may not want to hear the whole Q&A. You may just have a particular question. Feel free to go ask that. But you're certainly welcome to come back in about 10 minutes. We'll announce it here on the mic, and we'll have a Q&A and answer your questions then if you don't get them answered at the board. So with that, thank you for coming, and I'll see you in 10 minutes.
Thank you, Brad. My name is Brad Ernschwender. I am a citizen of Findlay. And my question is this. My reason for asking this is that the city administration has said this project will not cost the taxpayers 1 dime more. And the mayor has said that the project is dependent upon state funding. If the city is not awarded any state funding or other grant money, will this project be scrapped? And if it is not scrapped, are the remaining funds for completion of the project going to come from assessments for the adjoining property owners?
How you doing, Brad?
I'm doing great, Paul. How are you?
That's a good question. There is no
What's the
funding.
answer?
I'm working on it. There is no funding that's going to be done with an assessment. The ideal plan would be to pull grant dollars in and use the money that Marathon has appropriated for downtown projects as the matching dollars for those grants. If that all comes to fruition, then we will have very little money coming out of the city's capital plan to do the project. If ODOT decides we don't want to help fund, say, the intersection at Western and Sandusky, okay, it will then be the city's decision. Is that something that we really want to address? Do we feel that's an important enough problem to go ahead and use our capital dollars for? So when we say not one dime will go towards this project, that would be if all the funding that we have mapped out comes to fruition. The first step in finding out if that's going to be able to occur is the largest pot, and that's this ODOT Transportation Alternative Plan.
Okay. Taking that into consideration, are we in essence, and I understand that the rerouted traffic may be much more minimal than it was with the prior design, but are we in some sense getting the cart before the horse in the fact that we are preparing the alternate routes after the fact rather than prior to the downtown redesign?
That's actually not the case.
Oh, it isn't? Okay.
No, the Transportation Alternative Plan is the first funding piece that would be requested because that ODOT program has the longest lead time for appropriating those dollars.
Okay.
We're pursuing other funds that we can use the Marathon money as matching for to get Blanchard and Sandusky, if we can do that, and Blanchard and Western done ahead of the Main Street project.
Okay. Last question really is for Brad. On the revised concept, what kind of volume of cars will these turn lanes accommodate?
The turn lanes at the
On
intersections?
on Main Street at the intersections?
On Main Street, it'll accommodate the same capacity that they have today.
Which is?
You could potentially have over 25,000 vehicles a day. You
No,
could
no,
accommodate,
I'm
right?
talking about capacity in the turn lanes. How many cars deep are those turn lanes going to be designed for?
The stacking distance, whatever they call it, the Q or the stacking is today, that's what they'd be designed for, maybe a little bit more. So, well,
And-
this is
and-
Dan Biebert's the traffic engineer. He's scaled it out.
Yeah, I was going to say, and that is how many vehicles?
Right. Are you asking Brad if the stacking lanes are going to be shortened with the medians?
What I'm asking is, on the revised concept, the turn lanes that are going to be there, approaching those intersections, how many cars will fit in that turn lane before they are
In a travel.
extending into
Okay.
that traveling lane?
Yeah, that's a good question, and it really varies depending on what intersection you are at. And like say, we looked at 10-year volumes, projections, and looking at the Marathon, improvements, extensions, growth of Marathon, and then we did sort of an overall growth of traffic in the area. Then we looked at, your worst sort of, 20 minutes out of the day and say, okay, how long would that back up essentially? And that's based on the traffic counts that we did previously in the fall of this year. And then through our computer modeling, it could essentially estimate, okay, this is how much queue or backup you would experience during the peak hour, and that's what we based on
Okay.
our storage links.
Okay,
Yeah.
thank you.
And if you scale it, you figure about 20 feet per car, so you can skid on there. Now, it's not to say, just like today, there are times when the center turn lane is congested and you can't get in the center turn lane. So it's not to say that there might not be a period where the cars turning left are in a travel lane waiting just like they are today. So we put the pedestrian crossing islands where there's very rarely cars making a left turn.
Okay. Last but not least, I want to thank everybody for the opportunity for a Q&A.
You're welcome.
Appreciate that.
Others?
My name is Tom Mills, also a citizen of Findlay. I was asking the folks earlier about the potential of tying the river into the Transportation Alternative Program. They talk about recreation, and I know Cincinnati and some other communities use their river a lot. Of course, ours is a lot smaller than the Ohio River, but it seems like there's potential to do more along the river as a part of downtown than we're doing. I was chatting with some folks earlier, and they were concerned about safety. Any thoughts on the river?
Tom, I think that's a good idea. I think it fits into what has been alluded to many times as sort of the master plan. So when we get into these venues and we're talking about specific opportunities that we have, which has been most of the focus around the Transportation Alternative Plan, this I think would be one of the first steps. Certainly there are a lot of things, and I know you're involved with the Shade Tree Commission, and I appreciate those efforts. There are a lot of things that the community can do to build on the momentum that we have. What you're alluding to is just another one of those opportunities, but it has nothing to do with this ODOT application. So there's nothing in this plan that's been attributed to the river or the Riverwalk itself, outside of a very small section that we're talking to the Hancock County Park Districts about tying into Corey Street.
And the idea there would be to get a better crossing maybe on the south side of the river at the bridge, so bikes and pedestrians could get across, kind of the same concept to link up with the Riverwalk. And we have been, as Paul said, looking at ways to connect Corey Street also somewhere along the river through the downtown. That would probably be part of this overall comprehensive plan. We have some concepts looking at it, but it wouldn't be part of the TAP application.
My name is Tim Coppice. I'm a business owner here in Findlay, but I'm not in the downtown district. My question to you is, you said that there would be no assessments. My business sits on an unimproved roadway, and if they'd made an improvement in the roadway in front of my business or tried to provide parking for me there would be an assessment to my landlord, which in turn would then reflect probably an increase in my rent. Why am I asked then to subsidize the downtown for things like this when in turn nothing is going to be done for me as a business owner in this community? I don't see where a fair plane is being offered. There's already downtown reinvestment money for people that own these buildings. They're also going to be the folks that get the direct benefit out of the revitalization of the downtown as far as their property values and things like that. Where is there stuff for other business owners in this community?
Well, as I said before, there are not going to be any assessments driven to individual property owners for this project. That's never been part of the plan, and it's not part of the plan now. And I'm not sure that I'm the best person to answer that question in this venue. When you ask me what else is it that the community can do to help you as an off Main Street business owner, I think that's a question that might best be brought up at your downtown board meetings at the Alliance. What I'm focused on is taking a look at every opportunity that I can to leverage investment in this city to go after programming that can improve any part of the city that I can. We're here talking about Main Street right now, but we take a look at a lot of other opportunities. The Shade Tree Commission is not a Main Street project. There's a lot of focus that has been driven towards our capital plan that is not just Main Street, it's citywide. It's water, sewer, storm, streets, and every day we're working to try to make those improvements better for everyone in the city. So while I can't specifically answer your question and I don't know specifically where your property is, I can tell you that there are no assessments going to be driven, and we're working hard every day to try to make every opportunity that we can come to fruition.
But that is my question. Why are there no assessments? If they're going to be the direct benefit or to receive the direct benefit from this, why are they not participating more in it?
All right, I didn't understand your question. The reason for that is because there are not city dollars going towards the project. The old plan, I think when this was brought up a decade ago, and there may be some people that are better suited to answer the amount, I believe there was some investment that was going to be required by the downtown business owners to get the streetscape project done. In this particular case, if we have Marathon willing to contribute $5 million towards this Main Street project, and we have ODOT willing to contribute $2, there does not need to be any downtown business investment.
So then when you come and improve my roadway, there won't be a need for an assessment there?
We haven't assessed anyone for a roadway
There would
improvement.
be. If you improve my street, you're going to assess the landowners for the improvement of that roadway.
That's new to me, because we haven't assessed anyone for any of the dollars that we've put into roadway projects since
Yeah.
I've been here.
That would be news to me too then, I'm afraid.
It sounds like a good follow-up conversation.
Okay.
John Bauer.
I'm sorry, what'd you say your name was?
John Bauer. Sorry about the voice, but you know, this is the way what you get a lot of times with me. First of all, thank you all very much for the question and answer session. That's something I really stressed that I thought was important in order to get community input. I do wish that we had known about it earlier. In the paper this morning, it said no questions and answers. So I hope we'll continue to have venues for this.
Yeah, there is. I mean, there's obviously more work to be done on
Yes.
this, John. This is, again, this is the first step.
And that's really what my question is then. As I understand it, we have to tighten up the plan to apply for the grant. The grant's awarded based upon that plan, but then we get a year to change the plan and we get to keep the money even though we changed the plan?
Yeah, I'm glad you asked that, because I was going to bring it up. There are aspects of the plan that are funded through the Transportation Alternative Plan. So we laundry listed the things in the TAP LOI, pedestrian bump outs, and I'm going to just hit the high ones. Pedestrian bump outs, relocation of the trees to create better connectivity with the sidewalks on Main Street, the Corey Street bike path. Those amenities are key to the Transportation Alternative Plan. If we decided at some point that we did not want to put islands in the middle of Main Street, even after that grant is approved, ODOT would subtract those dollars from our award. Now, it may seem a little counterintuitive to them that we ask for it and then we don't take it. But what we have to do is identify anything that we want to get funding for up front. Because if we try to ask for it later, there is no opportunity for that. So the real quick and dirty answer is we maximize our potential for the grant application, find out what ODOT will give to us, and work through the details of plan development in 2015 based upon what they say they will fund. One of the things that I know Tim brought up, and I think it's an important point to reiterate, ODOT does not fund parking. The parking was a benefit in terms of numbers that was derived at the committee level based upon what the data said Main Street could take. So the parking conversation is really only one of the benefits from the plan. It is not relevant to ODOT's approval. So the fact that we even mentioned in the LOI that we could go with one lane and do angled parking and that would provide a parking benefit is really independent of how many points ODOT will give the application.
Great. Just one final point related to the gentleman that was asking about improvements in front of his place.
Mhm.
I do believe that property owners are assessed for sidewalks. As far as I know, I do know of one individual in particular who was forced to put in a sidewalk even though it doesn't connect to anything on either end.
There is a sidewalk requirement. That's in the code. There are some sections of the sidewalk that have fallen into disrepair, and I can't tell you what year it was. It's before my time, but the city did go through and do a sidewalk plan. They asked the property owners if they wanted to pay to repair the sidewalk. The conclusion was for any number of property owners, no, I do not want to pay. Go ahead and assess me. So it was a conscious decision that they made to be assessed in lieu of paying for the sidewalk improvement themselves.
one way or the other, they were gonna pay for it though.
That's correct, just like
Okay.
the code requires.
I'm Barb DeLong, resident of Findlay, born and raised, moved away, moved back in the last 10 years. I guess I do thank you for the question and answer. The one thing that I had brought up to Mr. Russell, and he kind of answered it, years ago, growing up, they were doing the parking garage here in town. It was supposed to bring people downtown, places to park. It's not a safe place. I never parked in it. I worked at First National Bank. We would not park there because we would walk clear down to the other end to park. That was the one. The other thing was, and when you talked about things being assessed, years ago, we're living in my mom and dad's house. They've since deceased. Years ago, City of Findlay was going to come through and put sidewalks in everybody's neighborhood. They live in a self-contained neighborhood. No one was in there unless they belonged in there, but they were made to do. They were going to start on the north end. They were going to go through Findlay and continue with this. Is this with downtown going to be like this sidewalk project, that it never got finished from where it started out north and that was it? Is it going to continue downtown? I mean, if we do this big project, is it going to be continued and not say, okay, this didn't work, just like the parking garage didn't work, just like the sidewalks didn't continue on? And my other suggestion was, I don't know how many people have been to Columbus, Indiana. That's where we've lived since '78 before coming up here. Everything is architecturally correct. You can't build anything without it being approved. And they do have the angled parking, which I'm glad you did away with reverse angle. I can see the angled parking. But they have it going 2 lanes, going down. If you want to go downtown, you can go downtown, but they have other routes that you can get around that you don't have to. I don't see Findlay having that where you can go around a different way. So my suggestion is go to Columbus, Indiana. They've built parking garages. They have apartments completely around the parking garages. We go back there quite a bit. It's beautiful. So if it gets anywhere, you know, like what it is, because it does bring people downtown and, you know, more power. But I want to see it follow through. Like I said, people put up with the sidewalk deal, and we've gone around town here, and you'll see maybe 2 houses that have sidewalks, and then it goes forever, and there's no sidewalks. I think we need to do something. If we want to make it a safer place for kids to walk, people to walk in our neighborhoods, we need to go back to the sidewalk thing that they started years ago. And Jackson Betts was even one of the people who fought for his neighborhood not to put those sidewalks in, and it didn't do any good. Thank you.
You betcha. Okay, so you might have to come back up here and coach me up a little bit on your suggestions. First was if you start it, finish it.
Right.
Right? All right. So I'll try to be diligent with that. Second was bring back the sidewalk program.
Right.
Okay.
If you're going to talk about safety, we need to talk about safety not only downtown, but we need to talk to, you know, and that was a project that was started that was supposed to continue throughout the
Right.
whole thing. And as far as being assessed, yes, the homeowners were made to put in the sidewalks. They had no choice.
Correct.
And they were assessed for those sidewalks. And if you lived on a corner, then you had to do double and you were assessed double.
Okay.
But I don't want to see a project start and it's like,
Right. Well, again, for the project that we're talking about tonight, you're saying if you start the Main Street project, finish the scope of the Main Street project. Take a look at the sidewalk program and take a look at the city providing parking garages or some other place for people to safely park so that we can.
I love the
Got it.
alleys with the lights because I think that's a wonderful idea. But
do too.
I just know how the parking garage was. It's a white elephant. No one wanted to park there.
Well, and I want to note that the city does not own or control the parking garage.
No,
Okay.
I was made to understand. I didn't know that. But, you know, don't do something that's going to end up being, in the long run, not work. So,
I will try. Thanks. Appreciate it.
The community that you mentioned, the restructuring committee has either already taken a trip there, some already have, and others are going. So one of the things the committee that has looked at what are some of the best downtowns around the country to look at for best practices and designs, and we suggested some, they suggested some, and Columbus, Indiana was one of those mentioned, and they've organized a trip to go over to Columbus already.
My name is Dave Whoopser. Paul, I'll give you a couple ideas. You don't have to pay me a consulting fee.
That's funny.
The first thing is your traffic lights downtown are all computerized.
Mhm.
If you would set those for 22 miles an hour, the people that are going through town would be happy as clams. They don't have to stop for a light. The people that think people drive too fast think that's good. It's going to be slower than they are now. There was a time, and I can't remember if it was here a long time ago, but I've seen it in other cities, and you put a sign up next to the light, signal set for 22 mile an hour. And they soon learn if you go faster, you're going to get stopped at the next light. One. I think, haven't seen the accident reports, that probably a lot of your problems come on right turn on red, which says after stop, but you know, that's only advisory in this town. Return the no turn on red signs. They were there for years. Why or who took them down, I have no idea. That'll stop running over people when you're making a turn. And you won't need to cross the middle of the street. You can cross the crosswalk where you belong. Third question is, or not a question, third suggestion is, you talked about, this was talked about earlier, I think the mayor might have said something about the UPS trucks and they have to block a lane of traffic. Well, we're going to enforce that. The question is, why don't we enforce it now? Get the troops out there, and when they stop in front of Flowerland and all the other, well, Flowerland's gone, I guess. When these guys all stop, hey, give them a ticket. Get them off the street. So you got 2 lanes of traffic, and people aren't changing lanes to get around them, particularly in the morning hours. So there's 3 things you work on. It's free, no problem.
Thank you, sir.
Yes, sir.
Hello, my name is Lois Meyer. I'm disabled and I have low vision, and I talked to one of the gentlemen about this, but when I'm trying to cross the street and having a bad leg, I cannot get across the street fast enough, and as I'm going, I don't have peripheral, and all of a sudden, I have a car coming at me, and I don't know whether to try and stay there and let them go around me, whether I rush across the street and take a chance of falling. I don't really know what to do. And the second thing is, I do have a scooter, but I don't feel it's safe to ride it downtown on the sidewalks because I've had bikes coming at me, and I go slow on my scooter. So I feel like I can't use my scooter downtown, which is what I need to get around on those bad days. And the other thing I'd like to bring up is the gal did bring up about the sidewalks. In my neighborhood, which is Fairlawn Place here in Findlay, where Jefferson School is, those sidewalks, our sidewalks are fine. We've already fixed ours, okay, because of me. But I cannot ride my scooter from South Main to Washington Ave without any thought at all, because the sidewalks are up, they're down, you can't tell. I've almost broke my scooter, you know, like broken a wheel off because it was such a high one. And so we need to do something about sidewalks, because for me, if I would like to get out of my house and not be homebound, I need to be able to get around. I like the way they've done the downway so we can get the scooter down, but it doesn't do me any good if I can't get up on that next sidewalk because it's so high and I don't want to break it. And I do ride hats a lot. But my other question I do have for you is, okay, so we're going to fix downtown, and I love this whole idea because I do eat downtown. We go to Findlay Inn a lot. We go to Logan's, you know, Revitalization, Wattle Peppers. But how are you going to bring the other businesses downtown when we've got businesses that are leaving, like Craft Gallery left because of the other issues that we have with the town, with the flooding, which I know is not part of this. But how are you going to bring those businesses down? You know, is there some project to bring businesses to Findlay, like bring more, you know, restaurants and things like that?
Well, again, the economic development group and the downtown group are very focused on what it is that they can do to try to encourage people to get business downtown. And I really approach it as taking one step at a time. There is nothing that we're going to do to flip a switch and make everybody extremely interested and make downtown Findlay this business mecca. I think we are very fortunate to have the employers downtown that we do now. And so what can we do to capitalize on that momentum that we have and make it a more attractive place for someone? Handicap accessibility, as probably as much as anything. I've had people reach out to me and say, you know, when you do this, if you do it, make sure there are some areas where I can get out of my car, make sure there's some areas that I can get my scooter up
Exactly.
onto the sidewalk.
Mhm.
Doing those kind of things as part of this project are no-brainers from my perspective. But it's just, this is just one thing that I think is going to help get more businesses downtown.
So question for you, if you do the median, is it going to be low that you can cross with a scooter?
Correct,
Or is it going to
yes.
be raised? It's going to be low?
Correct.
That's awesome. That's perfect. I appreciate it. Thank you again for your
Thank you.
time and the questions.
Yeah, just a couple of things. One is, we didn't get into all the details, but the signals could be timed so the pedestrian gets a 1 to 2 second jump on the traffic. And if you had those intersection improvements, so people have other routes, that would, be one way to slow vehicles down a little bit, but give the pedestrian a little bit more time to cross without really impacting traffic very much. And then you can have audible signals. You've probably been in some towns where right now you have the countdown that says, that works better for pedestrians and motorists too, because they use the countdowns to kind of figure out when the signal is going to change. But the other thing you can do is put audible signals in, and that adds cost. That's not in the package now, but so that people with vision impairments know that they can cross, and so that could be potentially done at one intersection. That's not part of the cost. As our population is aging, we're starting to see that be more common in the future for signals. So it's pricey now, but the price maybe could come down in the future where it's something that could be considered.
Could you explain what you mean by audible signals?
Sure, it's audible. It beeps or lets you know cross. So for vision impaired, it's great. If you're a resident that lives next to it, it can be pretty annoying. In some places like Kalamazoo, I worked in Kalamazoo, Michigan, and they put about 20 of them in, and we had to really work on adjusting the noise level to get it just right and so forth. And they found it to be pretty successful, so the person gets a knowledge. It won't work at the mid-block pedestrian crossings, but it would work at the signalized crossings. Other questions?
Second round of questions?
Sure. Second round, anybody?
My name is Barry Linnekin. I have so many questions, I don't know where to begin. But one thing that I will tell you, over time I've noticed, not only in this town, but practically everywhere I've ever traveled, if you want to ram something through, in the interest of safety, we must do this. In the interest of safety, we've got to have sidewalks. In the interest of safety, we need this downtown project to proceed. The problem with all this is you don't have the money. I don't care what you say. $8 million will not complete this project with all of the aspects that are involved. It's impossible. Just read the paper and see what the budget amounts are, or the cost amounts are, to repave a simple side street. Hundreds and hundreds of thousands of dollars just for a matter of a few hundred feet. I can't imagine you're resurfacing Main Street, resurfacing all of these Blanchard and Western, all of these major projects that have to be incorporated for all this to work. There's just not going to be enough money. Now, let me make one final comment. The thing that's so comical to me about this proposed downtown, these bump outs, jaywalking is illegal. Now, you may say the Ohio Code says you're supposed to yield to pedestrian traffic. I'm sure that's true, but you're going to have, regardless of how many lanes you decide you have to have, you're going to have through traffic. People are not expecting pedestrians to be jaywalking in the middle of the street, in the middle of the block. We used to have some designated areas years ago in downtown Findlay. They were eliminated years ago because of, in the interest of safety, we can't have this going on. It's still illegal to jaywalk. I don't care. I don't know the law. This is just a gut feeling that jaywalking is not in the interest of safety. And people that have been held up waiting for delivery trucks and time signals, traffic lights that are supposed to finally bring the speed limit in Findlay down to what the posted limit is, 25 miles an hour downtown. When we were on our way, to this meeting, a city patrolman with no lights, no signals. He'd just come out of the North End Marathon with a giant coffee, heading to town. He was driving 35 or more all the way to downtown and passed us doing 35 miles an hour when we were signaling for a left turn to come to this meeting. He's a law enforcement. He wasn't going anywhere in an emergency. He was going in to clock out, as far as I know. But I'm just saying,
Okay.
in the interest of safety, you sure as heck don't want to establish a whole series of bump outs to encourage people to jaywalk in an area where it's just not going to be safe.
It's not jaywalking if they walk in a marked crosswalk. That's not jaywalking.
That's jaywalking to me. In the middle of a block.
That's
Now,
not correct.
how are you going to see the marked crossing when the street is snow covered, like it was just a matter of a couple weeks ago? Ice and snow covered, you couldn't see markings for parking.
I understand your comment, sir. Let me ask you to answer the one.
Okay,
part of
you
your
can answer
question.
either one or all of them, I don't care. I'm
I'll
sorry,
address-
what
I'll
was the
address
question to
I'll
me?
address the funding
Okay,
part of your question.
okay, fine.
Pavement is not included in this application. The intent is to get the project done and have ODOT come in and pave it as part of their normal programming. So you are right. If pavement up and down Main Street was going to be included in this budget, the dollars that have been discussed do not cover that cost, but it is not part of the project.
May I interject? Who's going to pay for repaving Blanchard after all of these modifications that are proposed to keep the traffic from being in downtown?
That's an intersection project, and those costs have been added into the budget for that intersection. If we get the funding for that project from ODOT and Jobs Ohio and 629 funds and put that marathon matching towards it, we will have the funding for the pavement included in the project.
Okay, now, when I say pavement, I guess I misspoke. I'm talking about the curbing and all of the associated construction costs that go in to modifying these intersections on Western. with
Okay,
the-
so here's what I would suggest, sir. When we get to the point where we're putting the engineer's estimates for those projects and pursuing that funding, I would be more than happy to sit down with you and give you a detailed breakdown of the costs associated with that project.
But you see, the public has been allowed to believe that this whole pipe dream can be pulled off without a single dime coming from the taxpayers. It's just not true. That's just not the way it's going to work out. You and I both know that.
Well, I'm telling you what I am pursuing, sir. If you are insinuating that I am deliberately making false statements, I can guarantee you that's incorrect.
I'm not insinuating that you are. I'm insinuating that every time this proposal has been offered, you come away thinking, well, golly, it's all covered. Marathon's going to kick in $5 million, and we're going to get $2 million from the state.
If it's not, then someone will have the opportunity to say no.
Now you tell me that the bump outs, they're not covered. Or they
That's not
won't
what
be.
I said. They will be covered as part of the program. That's one of the integral parts of the application for
okay.
ODOT.
All right.
And if I could, sir, I'll be happy to spend as much time as you want taking
Okay,
a look
fine,
at the
yeah.
individual improvements
All
if
right.
we
I
could
just
get to
want to
some
bring
other
a
people's
few.
questions.
I have so many bullet points, I could keep you here all night, but I won't. Thank you for your answers.
Sure. Second round.
How about another one in the first round, please?
Oh, sure.
My name is Steve McClellan, a resident of Findlay. Since the angle parking has been eliminated and we're keeping the parallel parking, you mentioned that there were going to be adjustments to the existing parallel parking to maybe make it a little bit easier, more pedestrian friendly, easier to park, etc. What is the net against the existing parking that we have now?
I can't tell you that at this point. And it will be directly related to the extent of the bump outs, and
Can you
related
say
to the funding.
more or less?
It would be less.
What are the plans then to help our downtown businesses then with parking, since the reverse angle is gone, and not only that, we're actually going to
Right.
have less existing parking.
Right. Certainly, that's part of the discussion. What do we need to do as a municipality, and how do we coordinate with the business owners downtown to work through the parking problem? It's already, we know, based upon the work that was done, that there is a very highly concentrated parking volume. But where is it? If it's just on Main Street and we have employees that are parking on Main Street, then that's a discussion that we need to have as well. We can also talk about the amount of time that you're allowed to park on Main Street. If it's taken from 2 hours to an hour and a half, you essentially create a 25% volume increase just by that move alone. So while parking volume increase is not part of this project, it is certainly a continued part of the discussion that relates to that overall plan that we talked about. Operationally, we probably need to do some things different, but as far as part of the TAP application, that parking issue is not going to be resolved.
And then just a follow-up comment on parking, based on what I've seen of the Marathon garage plan, that will be a net further significant reduction in off-hours available public parking.
I would say that is correct. Yeah, there are more than likely, and Marathon should probably more adequately address it, but from my perspective, there is no public parking that's going to remain in those structures at this point.
Thank you.
You bet. Thank you.
One more first session question, and I think I'll use my educator voice and I won't need the mic.
Okay.
But I'm Carol Peters and I'm a resident of Findlay, and my question is, outside dining is delightful, but, and I know you're moving the trees off the walk so that it's going to widen it from that standpoint.
Mhm.
But what are you going to do to guarantee that scooter riders and wheelchair riders and just pedestrians in general will be able to get through there
Sure, that's a good question.
without blockage?
We already have set up some criteria that mandate that you have to leave an access lane for pedestrians if you do install any kind of outdoor dining. And if you'd like, I can get some contact information or just give you my card, and I can email you what those criteria are. Certainly interested as we move forward in working through the detail phase of this plan and getting some input from individuals who are going to be looking at those aspects.
Okay, thank you.
You betcha.
I'll give you my business card before I leave.
Any other questions? We'll stay up here if you'd like to talk one-on-one. Oh, sorry, we've got repeat customer. And don't forget, if you didn't really want to get up to the mic, you can talk to us. But even if you talk to us, it's helpful if you write the comments down, because we go back and look at those and make sure we've addressed them or consider them as we move forward.
Paul, I'm going to ask this question. I know we have, I believe, 5 members of City Council present, and my question is this. Assume we get the grant money. Assume we put the wheels in motion. Assume legislation is entered to proceed with the physical construction of this project. Is that legislation going to be absent of the emergency language, thus allowing for a possible referendum by the people if they so wish?
I can answer that. I won't introduce the legislation without the emergency clause.
Why?
I'm always going to put that on there. It's up to council whether they vote on that by emergency and how many readings they give it.
Once again, I'm not asking how many readings. I'm asking, is it going to have the emergency clause? And you said yes.
Yes.
Doesn't mean we accept that automatically.
That's right.
I'm.
It's the opportunity.
That's why I'm asking, John. You know, I know there are 5 of you.
I mean, he puts it on every one of them, and we take a look at that.
And I understand, and I do understand, and I want to make this clear, that this particular council has been very careful about rubber stamping everything with an emergency clause on it. And I appreciate that. Of the 5 of you that are present, what is your personal intentions?
That legislation is so far away that I'll have to take a look at it at that time, and it'll probably be decided closer to that ordinance than at this point.
No. Somebody said April 1st. We're not talking about the,
Right.
we're not talking about the application. We're talking about the actual physical construction.
Correct.
Yes, yeah, that's at least a couple of years away. Once that's decided, then we'll take a look. There's an election in between there, you know, it's not to say that any of this is even gonna be around at this point in time, so I think you're asking.
That's a very good point, John. That's a very good point. I'm glad you mentioned that. Thank you, Paul.
Mm-hmm. Any other questions for the good of the order? Excuse me?
Can I make a comment?
Sure. Let this ma'am go first, sir. She's up at the microphone, if you don't mind.
Just real quick,
Mhm.
and maybe this was answered, where the Argyle was. Is that something that the city can't afford to buy to use for parking? I mean, I realize that the only thing that would make sense would be southbound entrance only, and then you'd pull out behind, in the alley behind, but it seems like it's the perfect place for a parking area. It's right there. I mean, right now, I'm middle to low class. I don't go downtown unless I have to go to a lawyer, or there's nothing there for me. A lot of the restaurants are too expensive, but if we brought in some cafes with the outside dining, that's appealing to me. And it seems like where the Argyle was would be a great place for parking. Is that something that we just can't afford? Because I know we've bought
Well,
other properties.
Yeah, most of well, I'm not sure which parking or property you're referring to with regards to purchase. Most of them have been flooding, but I can answer this. The focus that I've had for this project in particular has been very focused on making sure that we don't compromise in any way our current capital improvement plan. It's taken a lot of effort and a lot of work to build that back up to where it needs to be to properly maintain all of our streets, going back to another gentleman's point about our infrastructure. And I think there would be a lot of mixed emotions in the community again with the city deciding to buy what is now private property and make an investment on that piece of property. Again, if we take a look at the downtown master plan and we include parking as part of that discussion, that's where it would fit in. Unfortunately, this particular plan, with the concerns over safety and volume of traffic and not having some of these other improvements done before we talk about reducing lanes, doesn't address the parking. But there's certainly room for that and a need for that as part of the conversation. It's just really at that more global level, and I think it's something that we go back to the committee with and talk about, hey, what is it that we need to do now to try to address the parking issue?
Yeah, I mean, is that something that, when you guys threw this out there, you obviously listened. I mean, you listened to the people.
Right.
I appreciate that. You changed it back to 4 lanes. Is that something you could throw out to the community and say, how would you feel about us spending the money to buy this property for parking? And maybe you might be surprised. They might be okay with that. I don't know how much they're asking for the property, but, something to think about. But I do appreciate.
I appreciate your comments, and you're not the only one that's brought up the
I'm
conversation about a parking garage or additional parking downtown and that part of the question. I don't know if you have something you want to add, Councilman?
Just that,
Councilwoman?
a lot of people have contacted me with the same idea of the Argyle space. Do you have an idea of what the cost would be?
She's asking a question about how much it would cost to put a parking lot on the Argyle lot. And I really don't want to speculate at this point. A large part of that cost would be land cost.
Yeah.
When you're talking about putting a parking lot in, and any one of you guys that are still cranking them out in the business like I'm not anymore, can tell me a parking space can run you around $800 to $1,000 per parking space when you take into account just the construction of that parking lot itself and the drive lane associated with it. That's not including land cost. When you take a look at a parking garage, you're looking at somewhere between 15 to 20 times that. So,
And I'm not
$1,000
thinking-
per space.
I'm not thinking parking garage, just.
Well,
you know,
I
don't
I
know
only
that
say
any-
that because some people have
Yeah.
brought that up as a question, you know, is there
I
a
don't know
place
that
we could
have
do it?
Space for that downtown,
But certainly, parking is still gonna remain part of the conversation.
but, okay, thank you very.
Given the fact that we are, our economy has seen a bit of a resurgence in the last year or two, philosophically, I think taking up a space, prime real estate space in downtown Findlay that could be redeveloped by the private sector and put into more productive use than maybe a parking lot, is probably a better route to go, as opposed to spending taxpayer dollars on a very expensive piece of property in downtown Findlay, where maybe perhaps those dollars could be spent elsewhere. So I think along the same lines that Paul was saying, you know, we want to make sure that we're being smart about the usage of our tax dollars and our capital plan, knowing that the transportation alternative program would not fund a parking lot or a parking garage, allowing the market to dictate kind of what happens in that particular area is probably the best move at this point in time.
Sure.
I think given another economic time, it might be something that would be better considered. But the fact that, you know, I know our economic development folks are talking to people daily about their interests in downtown, redevelopment of buildings, redevelopment of empty land that's been created is a really hot topic right now. And so putting something into private dollars and private investment that encourages more productivity out of that particular piece of land is probably a smarter decision from the local government's perspective than maybe investing in a parking lot on Main Street, especially a very expensive property acquisition.
Do you think that if the property doesn't sell, if nobody does anything with it in, say, 5 years, you would reconsider?
I would say that there's going to be a lot of change in downtown Findlay, and hopefully we will see more private investment, because I would rather see more private investment in prime real estate in downtown Findlay than local government investment.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
I'm Larry Sargent. I'm a retired professional barber. I worked downtown for many, many years, and I probably lived in Findlay longer than anybody in this room. I love Findlay. It has been in the home of me and my family for many years. If you want to go back far enough, one of the first properties that was laid out on the Findlay was bought by a lady by the name of Nancy Sargent many, many, many years ago. Now there's been some questions about parking garages here in town. I know why the parking garage that was sold not too long ago for a very, very low figure. I know why it was built in the first place. The shopping center was going in. And a lot of these people uptown that own property had sucked on them for years and years and years and done very little to them. And all of a sudden they were scared. What's going to happen to my customers? So they talked to the city to put in a parking garage. And their idea was the parking garage will pay for itself. For the most of the life of that parking garage, it never paid for itself. Toward the end, it might have made it a little bit of a profit. I think it was sold to an uptown developer here for either $1 or $100. The city claimed that it would talk so much money to bring it up to the safety requirements. I don't know how much money he put into it, but I understand he put some into it and eventually rented all the space out to people for long-term parking, and all of a sudden every space was rented. Now the parking garage that was here, it was hard for women particularly to park because you had to make some sharp turns and it was dark, and most people don't want to walk 3 or 4 blocks to go to a business that they want to visit. Okay. Next, my comment is, Findlay has been known to some of us here that some of these people can be very arrogant. A lot of the uptown property owners who were for years, had a very arrogant attitude. And now, tonight, I see the arrogant attitude disappearing, and they're starting to listen to the people. And I must remind you, what does the Constitution of the United States shout out? It says, "We the people." That's not just this individual or that. It's all of us. We the people, one person, one vote. And we the people vote in elections, and we vote with our feet when it comes to coming uptown. I love Findlay. I really do. And I think it's a very vibrant Findlay place. It has a lot to offer. And like I said, I think that arrogant attitude is disappearing. They're finally realizing you have to appeal to a wide segment of the voting public to get something done, and that's good. Maybe the mayor would like to see it go a little easier, but it's not. By the way, she's a pretty good mayor. No, have I got enough brownie points now? Okay, good. Thank you very much.
Sir, I appreciate the comments, and I think one of the things that struck me, and I've been here for about 20 years, is that it's very evident in these types of venues that most people that live in Findlay do love Findlay. And that's why their opinions are strong one way or the other about what they think. And all these guys that have worked on this project have understood, and they've done it in other communities. This is a very process-driven project. And part of that process is getting input from the community and coming to a place where we're not going to get 100% of the support, but if we can get the majority of the community behind an idea like this and, get past some of the arguments maybe about whether or not it is safer or isn't, I think we can take a real big step forward. I'm careful to try to keep my opinions out of it because I think my job is to pursue these types of opportunities for the city. I do think this is a good one. I think it's worth moving forward with, and I appreciate all the questions from the council members and the community, the people that have stopped in. And all I can say is that we won't know where we can get unless we take a look at trying it. And that's really what we're talking about.
My name is Diane Reisner, and I do appreciate this meeting, and I appreciate you listening to the people who elected you to offices and you scratching the program that you had previously proposed. I believe a downtown is, it's needful to be attractive, to bring businesses in. Safety issues are important. But once we get a project going and it's done, and the rains come down and the floods go up, what's being done at this point in time to improve the drainage system so that we don't have the rains, the floods coming and destroying what has been done?
All right, so unless there's anybody that really wants to get into flood mitigation, I want to pass out another
No, I
card,
just wanna know
buy
about
you a
the
cup of
drainage
coffee.
system.
The drainage system in Main Street itself is adequately sized for the watershed, but it's so close to the river that when the river backs up, it has no place to go. So when you talk about drainage, you really are talking about a flood mitigation type project.
So in this part of your process, is there anything you can do besides draining the Blanchard to improve the drainage system so that all this work won't be destroyed?
Well, I don't think that the work will be destroyed. If I did, we wouldn't be pursuing it until after flood mitigation is done. These improvements are really independent of flood mitigation, and the drainage pipes themselves, if they were 5 times as big as they are right now, they would still backfill from the river. So Again, if you're interested, certainly flood mitigation is a long and very interesting conversation that I'm willing to have, but perhaps maybe not everybody wants to hear it right now.
Well, that's
So-
fine. I just wanted to know that it was being considered.
It is being considered, and fortunately, these two projects are able to be pursued independently of each other.
Okay, thank you.
Yep.
And I think with that, everyone's had a chance. We'll step here if you have questions, but appreciate everybody coming out, and those of you sticking around. I know it's been a long evening, but we appreciate your comments. And if you have questions, come up. Otherwise, have a good evening. Thank you.